close to what we do with human beings. We give them names. We treat them as individuals rather than simply members of a class. But it's arguable that this is all a little bit of a fantasy life that we live with our pets, because they kind of behave like other human beings. They're warm and fuzzy, for example. And we then sometimes catapult this warm and fuzziness into a different ontological domain, and we begin to treat them as if they really did have human attributes, which they do not. Now, I'm not arguing, by the way, that there is no animal that comes somewhat close to exhibiting some little measure of moral agency. We are dealing, after all, with biology here, not with geometry. And in biology, there are continuums. And, for example, the level of intelligence of certain animals is probably close to that of human infants. I don't think that justifies our treating them as if they were human infants, because they're not going anywhere the way a human infant is normally, routinely expected to go, namely to grow up into a moral agent. But it shouldn't be neglected, certainly not in a fully worked out ethics about how we should treat animals. I'm talking about the politics of the issue, not of the ethics of the issue. After all, we even distinguish that in our own relationship to other human beings. There are certain political obligations we have, and then there are moral obligations we have. And not all moral obligations become political obligations. We know that very well, especially in the American context, when we think about something like the First Amendment, which essentially protects people against any sorts of censorship, even of the worst things they could say or write. You would not have a fatwa against Salman Rushdie in the United States, not a legal one, because he has the almost absolute freedom to say what he will on his own initiative, and others may try to persuade him not to say it, may criticize him for saying it, may boycott him, but may not intrude upon him for having said something that may very well be objectively wrong to say. I'm not going to argue what is or is not objectively wrong to say, but neither am I going to rule out that some things may be objectively wrong to write, to say, to sing, to depict in the movies, on Broadway or whatnot, but still, at least within the American classical liberal legal tradition, that does not authorize the government to come in and regulate the matter and put it under the domain of law. It is a matter of morality, and it has to be handled outside of the law by imploring people to act better rather than by prohibiting them. Now, obviously, the U.S. is not consistent in that because, there's prohibition, there's drug laws, there's all kinds of laws against victimless criminals, but I'm using the most salient and most fitting example of the First Amendment to illustrate the point that what is morally right is by no means going to have to be what's legally right. You can have the right to do what is wrong, the legal right to do what is wrong, and the First Amendment is a very good illustration of that. Now, lots of people write very bad books. Most of you probably have read a few of them in your careers. Maybe you've written a few of them too. And you don't want to go to jail because you've written a bad book. Or you don't want to send anybody to jail because he or she has written a bad book. And yet you can say, it's a bad book. And the author shouldn't have written it. Should have stopped writing this book from the very beginning. It's wrong to have written the book, but it's not illegal to have written the book, not at least in a relatively free society in this classical liberal tradition in which the doctrine of individual rights has emerged and on which the animal rights tradition is hoping to rest its own ascription of rights to animals. Now there's a lot more here that can be touched upon, but I'm already noticing heads shaking, frowns coming my way, and you probably disapprove of what I say. Notice you're treating me like a moral agent. I just want to remind you of that. And when you do that, instead of just as a dog who just has to do his thing. Although maybe there is some of you who are that reductionistic about human conduct. So I think I put out enough of the material that you could latch in on and attack me, so that I'm going to put it to an end right now, my formal presentation. This paper on which I'm basing these remarks, which is a much fuller, fairly lengthy paper, will go up on the web in a few days when I cleaned some of it up and eliminated some of the redundancies and so on. And then you can really take it on if you wish, or there's a lot of stuff out there to deal with anyway. But this may be because somehow there are not a lot of people who write about animal rights, especially not in a skeptical vein. There's a few people, Colton is one of them, Ray Fry is another one, but there is actually quite a paucity of this. It's amazing to me. When I got into it, suddenly I became famous. Not because I had actually planned to, because there was this piece that apparently there was some demand for in the publishing world. Let's find somebody who's critical of animal rights. Well, there's Machan. Okay. That was basically the process of reaching this triumphant celebrity status as an animal rights critic. Anyway, thank you very much for your attention, and I will take questions if you have any.